So let us get started. Very warm welcome on behalf of the OECD from us here to celebrate the International Equal Pay Day, which was on September 18. So we're just a few days late, but nevertheless very enthusiastically celebrating this important international day that seeks to generate more awareness and help everybody close the gender gap in pay between in the labor markets. And I'm very happy to welcome to you, all of you here today. We have a fantastic set of panelists together, and I would also start by thanking the Icelandic delegation, who for the second year in a row has taken the initiative to organize an event to celebrate International Equal Pay Day. And we will be having a series of presentations today. I will introduce the panelists as we go. And then we will have time for questions and comments and discussion. And participants can participate in this and ask their questions throughout the event. They will be read and moderated. And then we can discuss that. And if you have a particular question listening to our panelists, please also signal this. The event is being recorded just for all of your information, because we would like to have the opportunity for people who could not join today to join us at a later stage and take a look at these proceedings. So without further ado, let me hand over to our co-host from the government of Iceland, the OECD permanent representative of Iceland, Uno Ramet. Uno is the ambassador representing Iceland at the OECD. And of course, we're extremely happy and grateful to you, Uno, personally, your staff, and the country of Iceland to host this and take the initiative for this event. So over to you for a few opening remarks.
Thank you, Monica, and greetings to everyone who are watching. Thank you for taking your time to pay attention to a topic that is close to the heart of the permanent delegation of Iceland to the OECD in Paris and to the Icelandic government, namely advancing gender equality. The International Equal Pay Day on the 18th of September was designated as a day of observance in 2019 by the United Nations General Assembly at the initiative of Iceland. 8 member countries of the Equal Pay Day International Coalition, EPIC, presented the UN resolution, which received broad support of 105 co-sponsoring countries. Today, the coalition, EPIC, which is led by OECD, the International Labour Organization, ILO, and UN Women, is the only multi-stakeholder partnership working to reduce the gender pay gap at the global, regional, and national levels. Reducing the pay gap in the workplace is a lot about pay transparency, as we know, but not only. And that is why today we will place a special focus on the impact of parental leave policies on gender equality in paid and unpaid work. Maternal, paternal, and parental leave policies are an important component of inclusive growth and for achieving gender equality in the workplace, including equal pay. Women's equal participation in the labor market is disproportionately affected by unpaid care work and absence from work due to childcare commitments. Paid parental leave for parents can encourage more equitable contributions of both partners to household responsibilities from the very beginning of parenthood and is a key policy tool to narrow persistent gender gaps in the labor market. We will listen to our distinguished speakers who are either policymakers, public or private sector leaders from New Zealand, Portugal, Japan, France, and Iceland. They will share their thoughts on concrete steps and possible ways to move forward. We will also learn from OECD about what the evidence says. I believe that OECD is the perfect place to share best practices and to give policy advice to governments on what works and what doesn't, based on evidence from its 38 member countries. I'm hopeful that this panel will help us explore and make visible solutions to counterbalance the impact of the labor market's gender disparities around the world. But first comes the will. And then we must deal with culture and behavioral change. I've always thought that one of the hardest things to do is to change attitudes and behaviors. It takes time, sometimes even generations. However, if addressed efficiently, we can collectively move mountains. As a matter of fact, there is no good reason for why gender equality in the labor market should not be attained, especially as it is a matter of justice. Let me use this opportunity to thank the very capable staff of the Icelandic Mission in Paris and in the Directorate for Employment, Labor and Social Affairs of OECD for organizing this panel. And finally, I would like to thank you, Secretary General of OECD, Mathias Cormann, and Ulrik Vestergaard Knudsen, the Deputy Secretary General, for your commitment and for accepting without hesitation to organize this event with us. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Then you have already made a perfect segue into the next presentation, because we will be hearing from our Secretary General at the OECD, Mathias Cormann, about the OECD's priorities in gender equality policies and the great push that the organization is doing in order to finally close the very large, unfortunately, still gender gaps in the labor market, and particularly on equal pay. And you mentioned also, Ambassador, parental leave, which of course is a very, very important area, a very important determinant when we talk about closing gender gaps in pay, because we know that until a child arrives in a household, in a family, things can be quite equal, but then suddenly the scissor opens up and the women stay at home. They reduce their hours of work sharply. They do jobs sometimes that are not quite right for them, but they do whatever is available. They do it for a few hours, and the unpaid work balance is skewed very, very heavily towards women, and with men doing much less. So that is why we, together with you this year, of course, thought that this would be an important determinant for the discussions around how to close the gender pay gap. Now, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to our Secretary General, Mathias Cormann, who has given us a video recording because unfortunately he is at the moment in another engagement. But over to the Secretary General.
Dear Uno, friends and colleagues, today is an important opportunity to raise awareness about the remaining gender pay gap. Thank you, Uno, and thank you to the government of Iceland for your leadership on this issue. In 2018, Iceland was the first country in the world to make equal pay mandatory for both private and public sector firms. Today, it has closed 89% of its gender pay gap. Across OECD countries, on average, we have narrowed the gender pay gap for full-time workers from 19% in 1995 to 11.7% in 2020. The gap, though, is clearly still way too large. A woman makes about 88 cents for each full dollar a man earns for the same job. We see three priorities for action. First, pay transparency measures like employer pay gap reporting, equal pay audits, and job classification schemes are all key tools to measure the existence and size of the gender pay gap, to track, and by tracking, to drive progress in wage equality. Only half of OECD countries mandate systematic reporting on gender wage gaps by private firms. More could consider measures to improve pay transparency. Second, paid paternity leave can promote equal pay because it supports women's participation in the labour market on an equal footing with men. The provision and take-up of paternity leave have been on the rise in recent years. On average in the OECD, fathers are entitled to about 9 weeks of paid leave. Yet mothers are still much more likely than fathers to use parental leave. To narrow this gap, countries should consider granting a bonus to parents who share these entitlements equally, or reduce the transferability of leave days between parents. Third, we will not be able to close the gender pay gap without the full support of the private sector. Public policies can be powerful, but companies also need to embrace and implement pay equality practices and promote the take-up of paternal leave tackling gendered stereotypes in the workplace. While pay equality is essential for gender equality, ensuring equal pay for equal work alone is not sufficient. A coordinated and whole-of-government response is needed to address the remaining and numerous challenges preventing gender equality in all aspects of life. Advancing gender equality is a priority for me and for the OECD. Our first OECD Gender and Diversity Champion, Ulrich Knudsen, is driving our efforts, including the development of a new gender strategy for the OECD with great commitment and determination. And of course, we are both, and the whole OECD is benefiting from the committed and dedicated work of the Friends of Gender Equality Plus group, ably chaired by Madeleine Chenet and Anna Brandt. I genuinely hope that over the next 5 years, we will see a further material shift in the right direction, both on equal pay and on gender equality more generally. Thank you and enjoy your celebrations.
So thank you very much to our Secretary General, who has just very ably outlined why we think that the topic of parental leave is so important for gender equality, and also showing you that the OECD is really very much advancing not only in giving our policy advice, but also working internally on improving gender equality and preparing a new gender strategy, which I'm sure we're going to hear about more later from our gender champion. Now, without further ado, let me move to Iceland. Now, we're all jealous of Iceland. Iceland is constantly topping the league charts as being the most gender equal country. People are flocking to Iceland to find out how your PACE certification scheme works. People are very interested in how Iceland has become such a champion. What's the history? What is the path that led you there? So I am extremely delighted to have with us today the Minister for Social Affairs and the Labor Market of the Government of Iceland, Gudmundur Ingi Gudbrandsson. We are very, very curious and excited to have you with us today to hear from your perspective what is being done and what works to close the gender pay gap in Iceland. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you so much, Monica, and a very good day to all of you. I'm going to share with you some of the experiences that Iceland has had in the last 2 decades. And I'm going to concentrate on the parental leave system in Iceland. Now, we could easily say that equal pay is so much more than just the paycheck. Equal pay and economic independence are really the foundation for gender equality. And that has brought implications, including increased safety for women and girls from gender-based violence, to name one. I believe we all agree here in Iceland that here, 2 of the key components to our gender equality success are first, generous parental leave at the birth of a child for both parents, and then universal daycare and preschools. Iceland first instated an independent parental leave for fathers in the year of 2000, that is for over 20 years ago. And over the years, it has become increasingly normalized for fathers to take parental leave. Here, we have really seen a policy turned into legislation, changing mainstream societal attitudes. And I think that is something that we can be very proud of. I do remember 20 years ago, I was a bit younger then, but that was the time when sometimes fathers who decided to take parental leave, they were made fun of in the working place. I think this is almost not the case today, or I certainly hope it isn't. Now, yet another consequence of this is that by taking a leave at the birth of a child, fathers become more invested in the care of the child and create a habit of doing their share in the work for the children. The main goal of the Icelandic parental leave system is twofold. First, to ensure that children enjoy the care of both parents, and secondly, for both women and men to be able to organize family life and employment. And these goals are very important since all changes that are made to the system and the system itself is built up on these goals. So all changes must be in line with these goals if they are made. Now, the other element that has had some of the biggest impacts on Iceland's gender equality as we see it today is the high quality universal daycare and preschools we have in place for all children. I'm not going to discuss that further here today, but it's an important component of gender equality in Iceland. And when I prepare myself and my friends here in Iceland to many other countries, we can see that often the decision is made in some other countries around us where the woman decides to stay at home because preschools are far too expensive. So this is definitely an important factor as well. But back to paternity leave. Since paternity leave was introduced here, many studies have been carried out on its effects, and these show, among other things, that first, the relationship or bonding between Icelandic fathers and their children is significantly better than in countries where there is no paternity leave. Second, fathers generally make use of their rights, and it is now socially well acceptable for fathers to be at home with their children. About 90% of fathers have used their entitlements of paternity leave, or 82 days on average in the system. Thirdly, fathers' usage of the leave is supporting other changes such as more equal division of household tasks and the labor market participation of men and women. And fourth, the law has contributed to a more equal standing of men and women in the labor market, generally speaking. Now, other factors within the parental leave system, which have also had its effect on equality within the system, is the maximum ceiling of payments in parental leave. The higher the ceiling of payments, the more likely is that the father will use their quota. Therefore, given that the ceiling is high enough, fathers use their quota, and the equal rights enables care for both parents. We have had some changes in the parental leave system in recent years. And these we have based on the experience since 2000. So in 2019, the government decided to extend the leave up to 12 months, from 9 months to 12 months. But the question was how the months should be divided between the parents. And in the older system, we had 9 months, 3 months for each parent, and 3 months that they could divide between themselves. So a comprehensive review of the system was followed by this decision, discussion and debate within a committee appointed by the ministry here, with representatives from the unions and organizations of employers, as well as representatives from government sector. And in the end, after long and thorough debate in the committee, followed by public review and discussion within the parliament, a bill was accepted in the parliament, providing each parent the right to 6 months parental leave. However, each parent could transfer 6 weeks to the other parent. This legislation took effect 1st of January 2021, and the bill was accepted by all voting parties in the parliament. There was a huge debate there, and not everybody agreed on. Some people, they wanted completely equal rights, 6 months to each, and then there were others that said 4 months, 4 months, and 4 months divided then between them. So we don't really have reliable enough statistics from the period after the legislation was passed, but our preliminary results show that after the reform, 80% of fathers have taken leave and used their quota, apart from the transferable 1.5 months, so 6 weeks, which they leave to the mothers. So it's it's exactly the same as in the older system, where we had 3 months for each, and then 3 months they could divide between themselves, and the mothers always took those 3 months. So no change there, but a big change in the number of months allocated to each parent. Maybe I'm done with my time, Monica. So please let me know, but otherwise I wanted to mention 2 other things.
This is, I would, please go ahead and mention more things, because it really truly is fascinating. And I'm sure I already have plenty of questions, and I'm sure that our other participants are also very interested, because like I said, you have the gold standard and everybody wants to know how you got there.
Yeah, well, I blush now, but anyways, I also wanted to mention that the Icelandic Parliament passed the legislation on grief leave last June, which will take effect 1st of January next year. And the main aim of the grief leave is to give parents time for grief processing after a loss of a child. The legislation entails the rights of parents to a paid leave from work in order to have a successful return to the labor market as well as to society. And I'm mentioning this because the legislation is based on the parental leave system in Iceland. For example, regarding payments and time, it's 6 months individual right for each parent and 80% of income with a maximum ceiling, similar or, well, actually exactly like in the parental leave system. And to our knowledge, this legislation is a breakthrough in the sense that parent is defined different to other legislation in Iceland. That is, step parents and others that have had parent responsibilities with a child for more than 12 months before the child passes away are also entitled to the paid grief leave. And also parents can use their grief leave during a period of 24 months. So to our knowledge, this makes the Icelandic grief leave the most progressive one in the world. So now I'm bragging, actually, so just to make sure of that. Lastly, I wanted to draw your attention to a new research initiative by the Icelandic government. We know that women generally carry out more household tasks than men, and that the pandemic would increase the burden of what is often called the third shift. So the Icelandic government has initiated research on this matter so we can fully grasp the scope and impact of the third shift and what impact it is having on women in Icelandic households. So these are some of the sort of later developments that have been taking place, but I think I will stop here and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Minister Gudbrandsson. That was super interesting. And I know that you'll have to leave later, so I'm going to take my privilege of the moderator and ask you one follow-up question, which I think is really important. You mentioned that in the beginning, the people were not so convinced and men were being made fun of, and it wasn't the thing to do for Icelandic men to stay at home with children. We know that, for example, and we will hear more from Ms. Hasegawa later, we know that is the case in Japan, but also in my country, Germany, still in some cases. So many countries around the world are struggling with this image problem for men and masculinity and you know, what is acceptable. Can you maybe just say a few more words about how you think that societal change that you mentioned came about? Is it only through economics, in the sense money? Because if you get an 80% replacement rate for during your parental leave, that's quite a nice sum. But at the same time, you know, you're saying you have this great daycare system for children. So parents do have alternatives, and they're still staying at home. The men. Can you give us a little bit more something? Because I think many countries would love to know how you got Icelandic men to stay at home. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the question, Monica. It's a very good question and maybe a little tough one. But first I wanted to mention, I mean, time is a critical factor here, I think. I mean, it's 20 years or 22 years since we passed that legislation in year 2000. And what I mentioned before was, yes, definitely. I mean, especially in male-dominated workplaces, I know that in the beginning, it was like, are you going on a paternity leave? Ha ha ha. You know, can't the woman just take care of that? But I think this changed over time, gradually, and I think dads are proud of taking a paternity leave now. Partly this, I think the incentives that we have put into the system of paying 80% of the wages has made a difference, but I'm more convinced that the fact that we actually divided the months between the parents so that one had the rights to, when we had the 9-month system, one had the rights to 3 months, or both had the rights to 3 months, and then you had these 3 months that you can divide between the two of you. When you have the opportunity to go on a paid leave for 3 months to take care of your child, and you cannot transfer to your wife or to your partner, your spouse, it's more likely that you will take that. Mm-hmm. And that is exactly what we've seen. And especially in the new system, where we have 6 months and 6 months and only 6 weeks that are transferable, the guys or the fathers, they are taking their quota and only transferring what they can by law. So mm-hmm. I think that passing the law in this way is essential for fathers to participate, but also for gender equality on the labor market. And we've also seen that there's the payment ceiling also influences fathers more. So if the ceiling is not high enough, it's more likely that fathers don't participate.
Great.
I hope that answered some of your question.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the last follow-up questions quickly, because this is something I'm always intrigued in. Do you think in Iceland now, with the situation, is it really for somebody who is an employer and who hires, has to make a hiring decision? Do you think it's really the same now to hire a young man or a young woman?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Well, I think definitely that the fact that you have a law which enables parents the equal right to parental leave is less likely to influence your decision of, oh, I'm going to hire the guy because the woman is going on a leave. She's definitely going to have at least 3 kids and she's only 25, you know, that kind of thing. So that's my feeling, and I think we are really, by doing this, and this is really at the heart of the core of what I believe in politics, is that dividing the parental leave equally between the parents by law is enabling women to participate on the labor market. When we were discussing this, when we were increasing the number of months to 12 months, it was a lot of women who simply wanted to have the family decide so that they could take all the 12 months. I mean, there are opinions like that, of course, but I am so thoroughly certain that by doing this by law, we are ensuring gender equality on the labor market. And that comes number 1 for me.
Great. Thank you so much, Minister. We now, before we move to another minister from a country far away, at the other end of the world in New Zealand, let me just briefly welcome Putri Realita from Danone. She will be talking later about the private sector perspective on these topics for a company. So without further ado, let me now move on to New Zealand. We have the Minister of Internal Affairs, Women, and she's also the Associate Minister of Education, Jan Tinetti, who will tell us more about what New Zealand is doing to close the gender pay gap and work on parental leave. And again, we have a video recording because unfortunately it was not possible for the minister to be here with us. Oops. We see half of her at the moment. There we go. Wonderful.
Excellencies, and tēnā koutou esteemed colleagues, warm greetings to you all from Aotearoa, New Zealand. My sincere thanks to our friends in the Iceland delegation to the OECD for inviting me to speak with you today. I am delighted and honoured to contribute to this important conversation. Your event coincides closely with an important day for us here in New Zealand, Suffrage Day, which commemorates New Zealand women winning the right to vote in 1893. Next month we will be marking the 50-year anniversary of the passing of our own Equal Pay Act. These occasions are opportunities to reflect on how far we have come and to focus our minds and energy on what we have yet to achieve. In recent years, the pandemic exposed the long-standing structural imbalance in the division of care work. This has a direct bearing on women's ability to meaningfully and equally participate in the labour market. We can't talk about equal pay without talking about employment equity, and this requires us to look carefully at the way our labour market and supporting infrastructure is constructed. That includes gender norms and stereotypes, and it certainly includes parental leave and care arrangements. In 2018, my colleague, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, was the first elected leader to take parental leave while in office. This was demonstrably significant. Here was a woman at the most powerful role in our country, showing that taking leave, even at the highest levels, was a perfectly reasonable thing to do. It should be business as usual. The country kept running. We know that here in New Zealand, women are more likely to take breaks from the paid workforce to undertake caring, with a corresponding impact on their career and employment opportunities. Paid parental leave legislation was passed in 2001, which introduced 12 weeks of paid parental leave. Since 2002, the period of leave has been progressively lengthened, and in 2020 moved to the current 26 weeks of paid leave for the primary carer, plus 52 weeks of unpaid extended leave. Paid parental leave can be transferred to a partner if they become the primary carer. Partners may also take up to 2 weeks additional unpaid leave if they meet certain criteria. I am really proud of our efforts to extend this leave and the real difference it is making to many families, but it is not enough by itself to make progress on employment equity and equal pay. In the New Zealand economy, women have experienced higher rates of unemployment and continue to have higher rates of underutilisation. This has negative implications for their health and well-being, for their ability to provide for themselves and their family, and their ability to save for retirement. In New Zealand, we know that women have greater participation in part-time work. Of all working women in the paid workforce, nearly 1 in 3 work part-time. That is less than 30 hours per week. We also see a great deal of occupational segregation in New Zealand. Women work in a much higher concentration in the health and education sectors and in retail and the service industry. Parental leave provisions, particularly where sharing of leave between partners is encouraged, are part of the picture. But it's important to consider what comes next when that leave ends. One of the key barriers that women face to fully and meaningfully participating in the labour market is accessing childcare. The pandemic brought into stark focus in New Zealand, and I'm sure elsewhere too, the crucial importance of childcare to our economic infrastructure. A 2017 survey of parents who worked or who wanted to work found that 1 in 6 parents had difficulties arranging childcare. The main barriers cited were childcare not being available at the times needed and childcare being too expensive. In more recent research, we have found that particular groups of women have more difficulty than others accessing childcare. The Indigenous women of New Zealand, Māori, and also Pacific women are 2 to 3 times more likely to experience access issues than New Zealand European mothers, and 3 to 4 times as likely to face long-term access issues. Access issues are also strongly connected to socioeconomic status, and more advantaged families were more likely to be able to resolve childcare issues. 2/3 of parents who had difficulties finding childcare experienced work-related consequences, including turning down paid work, resigning from work, and stopping searching for work. Now, I'm happy to share with you some of the steps that we are taking here in New Zealand to deal with some of these barriers. The New Zealand government is focused on building a productive, sustainable and inclusive economy, particularly looking ahead to recovery from COVID-19, where the benefits of growth are shared more fairly. And in June, I launched New Zealand's first Women's Employment Action Plan, one of 7 plans under the government's wider employment strategy. I'm excited for the difference we can make for women through this targeted plan. And I'm proud to say that this work has been developed by women for women to support all New Zealand women to fulfil their potential. It contains actions to improve employment pathways for women who are marginalised at work, particularly Māori women, Pacific women, young and older women, disabled women, women who are former refugees and recent migrants, and women in the LGBTQIA+ community. The plan includes a specific action on exploring improved access to affordable childcare, and that work is currently underway. Ultimately, I am confident that this work will lay a foundation to ensure that New Zealand is a great place for women to work. I wish you well for the remainder of your discussion. Thank you again for inviting me to join you. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Minister Tinetti, for those remarks that show that in New Zealand too, we're facing the same problems. And thank you also for pointing out the whole range of different issues that contribute to the gender pay gap. So as we said at the outset, obviously there are other factors also at play that are very important and contribute to the gender pay gap. So we won't be able to solve everything with parental leave, but we will be able to go quite a bit. Now, before we turn to Portugal, I just wanted to quickly say there are questions in the chat which are for Iceland. They're very specific, but I think maybe we can return to you later, Minister. I think we're still doing well on timing, and continue now with another country perspective from Portugal. And I'm extremely pleased to welcome the Portuguese ambassador to the OECD, Manuel Lobo Antunes, to give us his perspective on parental leave in Portugal and the gender pay gap.
Good morning, good afternoon in some parts of the world. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very honored to be participating in such an important forum like this one. I thank UNO for inviting me. And now, as you said, the perspective of a country, Western European country, Mediterranean one. This is also this was also opportunity for me to learn a little bit more about our system, and I must say that I'm surprised in the good sense that indeed we have made substantive progress in terms of a favorable regime of parental leave. The basic or the starting point is, as our constitution says very clearly, is enshrined in our constitution, absolute equality between men and women in all circumstances of life, and of course also in terms of equal pay for equal work. Of course, this doesn't mean necessarily that it's strictly obeyed by everybody, but this is the principle, and of course those who not respect this principle have to suffer the consequences. And there is also, I think, an important advancement, conceptual advancement, is that since I would say 2009, when we reformed our labor code, it means that the concept is not father and mother, but is parenthood. This is the real partnership between the father and the mother, looking after the interests of the children. And this is very important because we introduced the concept of sharing responsibility, of sharing rights, and sharing duties. Let me say what the main features of our system. First, we strengthened the father rights by introducing an exclusive, compulsory and full paid leave for fathers, which is currently 20 working days, adding an optional and fully paid leave of 5 days. This means the father has not the option to work or not work, it's compulsory. The law says that the father have to have a full paid leave for 20 working days and can, if you want, additionally add more 5 days. We promote or try to promote and encourage shared parental leave, as I said. Parents now may take a leave period up to 180 days. However, this entitlement can only be granted if each parent takes a leave of at least 30 days. In this case, the allowance granted is also increased. 150 days fully paid leave or 180 days paid at 83%. After this period, both parents can take still an additional extended parental leave of 3 months paid at 25%, which is possible to combine with part-time work until the child is 6 years old. Furthermore, we grant the father the right to 3 times of work to attend prenatal medical appointments and the period of leave for feeding of 2 hours per day that can be taken either by mothers or fathers during the first year of the child. Overall, our systems aims to encourage, facilitate, and support fathers to take parental leave, thus sharing responsibilities and rights. Figures show, the most recent statistics show that after these measures came into effect, there has been a constant growth in the use of shared parental leave from 0.5% in 2005 to around 10% in 2009 and 45% in 2020. Besides, and in addition to legislation, Portugal has been creating favorable contexts for parenting, a new paradigm for organizing societies that recognizes the social value and the collective responsibility of parenting and care. This, in our view, is a broader strategy to promote equality between women and men, a strategy that requires, above all, a true social pact. Of course, legislation is very important. Law is very important, but you have to create the necessary culture for the law being effective and indeed influence the society and the development of this kind of principles within the society. It's not just passing approving laws, it's the practice. It's indeed let people know that this kind of measures, this kind of reforms are needed. They are in the benefit of the parents, but also in the benefit of the children. And this, I think, it's the most important reasoning inspiring this legislation. There are many other measures, perhaps of a minor dimension, and of course, we are absolutely available in my delegation to provide any further information that people would like to have about our parental leave system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. That was very interesting. And you too stress so much the cultural element here. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how difficult or easy it was to convince Portuguese fathers to do this. Was this just something that was universally accepted? And the second question I have for you is, we just heard from Iceland that we're talking about 6 months, and whereas 20 working days is 1 month, right? So are there ambitions, should I say, political ambitions, societal ambitions to go a little bit more towards the Icelandic solution, meaning increasing those months for the fathers, or is everybody happy with what you have right now?
Thank you. Well, there is something called economics and financing, and every country has its own limits and its own constraints. I think we should look for the positive side, and the positive side is, if you look into the past in relation to what we had in my country, the progress which we have made so far is indeed, I think, substantial. Of course, we are more ambitious than this, and we hope that in the future we can be still more ambitious and certainly going towards the Iceland solutions, if this is convenient to us. There is also, as I said before, a question of culture, a question of information, a question of I would say almost teaching, making people learn about indeed what they can or they cannot have, what are their rights. And this is a permanent, I think, a permanent session, so to say, a permanent process. And the matter of the fact is that, as I said before, along the years, you see that the rates of people benefiting from these benefits are indeed increasing in a very important path. And that means that people are more informed. And also that means that the new generation of young people who are more cultural, I say, more informed, better informed, more skilled, came to know that this regime exists and of course take profit of that. And also this has also to do very much with the labor market conditions. And so it's a mix of some factors, finance, economics, skill, workforce skills, and this will give us the framework that we have and that we may have. The ambition, of course, is always there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Now, let us turn to another country experience, but this time from a private sector perspective. We're extremely pleased to have with us Ms. Tomoko Hasegawa from Keidanren. Keidanren is an employers association in Japan, a very important one. And what maybe not so many people in our audience know is that Japan is one of the countries with the most generous father's leave, and has been for many years. Yet there's a bit of a puzzle. There's something on offer that is almost too good to believe, yet very few Japanese fathers are taking this leave. And I just anecdotally, I remember a few years ago when I was in Tokyo, I was speaking to a colleague, and she was telling me that she had two daughters, and for the first daughter, the father took 6 months of father's leave. And it was such a traumatic experience for him at the workplace that he said never again. And for the second daughter, he would not take any more father's leave. It was just too difficult. So this is probably something, Ms. Hasegawa, which resonates with you. And so we're really looking forward to hearing from you about how the Japanese father's leave, parental leave is being used, and what the position in particular of companies is on this, because the ambassador just mentioned, yes, of course, it's a question of economics. And so it's economics also in the company when you let somebody go for many weeks, for many months. How do you pay for this? How do you encourage it, or do you discourage it? So Ms. Hasegawa, the floor is yours, and we're very, very excited to hear about Japan's experience here.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. And I'm very pleased to talk about the gender equal workplace and the parental leave policy in Japan. And let me share you some slides. Okay. First of all, I'd like to outline Keidanren Japan Business Federation's basic stance. We believe that diversity and inclusion, hereafter I refer it as a D&I, fuels innovation and the key factor in creating a sustainable society. Of particular urgency is the need to speed up the economic empowerment of women who make up half of the Japanese population. So we voluntarily, as a voluntary initiative, Kildaren has set a target to increase the number of a ratio of female executives to 30% or more by 2030. To achieve this target, we are staging a campaign called Challenge 30 since March 2021, targeting 1,500 Kildaren major member corporations. To achieve this target, top management needs to reaffirm the importance of D&I and take the lead in driving D&I forward. Specifically, they need to, first, position D&I as an important pillar of management strategy. Second, accelerate the efforts from corporate governance standpoint to utilize the perspectives of diverse human resources, including women, in a decision-making process in the board of directors and elsewhere. Third, strengthening talent pipelines for discovering and nurturing human resources that can play an active role in various fields. Fourth, reform their organizational culture to maximize employee performance. Kildaren is calling on members to take such action, publishing the logos of corporations that have committed to this 30% challenge on a special website and appealing this action to investors and other stakeholders. Next, I will explain about the maternity, paternity, and childcare leave policy in Japan. In order to enhance women's economic empowerment, we need to support female employees during one of their most significant life stages, namely childbirth and childcare. In this area, as mentioned, Japan has a very generous system in place compared to other parts of the world. In Japan, a couple can simultaneously take maternity leave before and after birth and childcare leave, something which is very rare in other parts of the world. In terms of the numbers of weeks of paid maternity and childcare leave that can be taken, Japan has a very good system, namely 30 weeks that can be taken. Furthermore, in light of the fact that the number of double-income households now exceeds the number of households with a full-time homemaker, the Childcare and Family Care Leave Act has made it mandatory from April 2022 for corporations to encourage male employees to take childcare leave in order to dispel any perceived division of roles along gender lines, which suggests women should raise children and to urge men to proactively participate in childcare and housework. However, also mentioned, the ratio of male employee taking childcare leave is 14%, whereas the ratio of female employee taking childcare leave is 85%. So actually, we have a still long way to go. Lastly, I'd like to introduce some case example of corporate initiatives designed to encourage male employees to take childcare leave. An increasing number of corporations are aiming for all, namely 100% of male employees to take childcare leave. The banking, insurance, and broader finance industry is implementing various initiatives to encourage active participation of women in the workplace, which include boosting the percentage of male employees taking childcare leave. In 2019, Company A launched an initiative to encourage male employees who have just had a child to take childcare leave of approximately 1 month. The initiative was called 10+10 to describe a period of leave spanning 20 working days, including 10 days of short-term childcare leave and 10 days of paid annual leave. They encourage employees to take the leave and internally disclose the names of the departments and branches with employees who have taken 10+10 leave. While it might be easier for male employees to take childcare leave in some industries compared to others, we hope these measures will increase the ratio of male employees taking childcare leave even by a small account margin, which will contribute to greater gender equality in Japan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hasegawa. Maybe you can start. Yes, perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for introducing the Japanese rules here. What's interesting is that it's become mandatory, as you said, for corporations to encourage fathers to take leave. Can you say a little bit more about that? So, and what's the people's reaction? Is it the employers who are reticent, or when you try to convince a male employee to take the father's leave, will they be, yes, delighted, I'm packing up and I'm leaving tomorrow? Or they say, no, I don't want to do this. And you have to understand I have too much work and I can't, and my career and so on. So can you tell us a little bit more about what goes on in the companies?
Okay, it's mandatory for corporations to encourage male employees to take childcare leave. So it's you cannot force, the male employees to take childcare leave when they don't want to. So corporations are taking various initiatives, like a convey message from top management to encourage male employees to take the childcare leave, or notify employees through internal newsletters and magazines, and also incorporate diversity education into a management training system, and also conduct individual interviews with managers and human resource department around the time of childbirth to encourage male employees to take the childcare leave.
And is your experience that people are happy with this? I mean, do you see a lot of enthusiasm about men, or are men a little bit worried about doing this?
Men are hesitant, I should say, but from little by little, those male employees who took actually the childcare leave said that it was a great experience, like taking part in the childcare and raising their children. So that positive feedback made to inside the corporations. So I think little by little, I think that the ratio of a male employee taking childcare leave will increase.
Great. Yeah, well, we're already seeing it in the numbers. We had in 2010, you only had 2% of fathers, eligible fathers, and now, as you told us, it's 14%, which of course is not sufficient, but at least it's a substantial increase compared to 2%. So let's hope that goes on. I know that the minister has to leave, and Minister, we have two questions for you in the chat. So maybe I can just quickly ask them those two questions before you go, and then we will move on to the private sector experience and the OECD perspective, if that's okay for you. So in the chat, there's two questions. The first one is whether you've seen a growth in the average number of days that fathers take after the changes in the legislation. And the second question is about encouraging employers not to penalize parental leave takers when you consider opportunities for career advancement and acting stretch assignments and things like that. And did you put anything into your system that ensures that people, when they come back from leave, that they're treated in the same way as people who didn't take leave?
Yeah, thank you very much for the questions. The answer to the first question is yes, we are seeing growth in the average number of days that fathers take after they got the opportunity to have a longer leave. But I mean, this is with the reservation that we only have had the new system in place for less than 2 years, and you can divide the time that you have over the course of 24 months. As it comes to the second question, So while you're on paternity leave, you cannot be fired. It's by law like that, you cannot be fired. But you can be fired when you come back. That is possible. But I think that as more and more people, or more and more, both men and women are taking the paternity leave, this becomes less of a problem. But we don't have anything in our legislation that prevents companies to, make organizational changes that could affect your job after you come back, or even let you go. But while you are during the leave, that cannot be done.
But no special plans for advancement. No, there's no obligations for employers to give any specific incentives or for career developments when people come back. No,
and not by law. But obviously the companies, they can do that. I mean, this is not to answer this question, but there are examples of companies here in Iceland who encourage males or fathers to take paternity leave by exceeding the payment gap by the government and pay the full 80% of the wages of each person. So that is an incentive or an example of a corporate incentive.
Great, thank you so much. I know you have to leave soon. Thank you so much for joining us today, and congratulations to Iceland. And we hope that in future years, when we do this event again, that we'll have more countries that are reaching the bar, and that Iceland, the Icelandic examples have well disseminated into other OECD countries. But it's looking good already. We heard from Portugal, we heard from Japan that maybe if it's a little bit slower, but at least we're on the right path. So thank you again for participating and for Iceland's leadership in this topic more generally, including to the ambassador, of course. So
thank you.
We will now move on to another private sector experience, and that is from Danone. I'm very happy to welcome Putri Realita. Putri is the Global Head of Culture, Engagement, and Diversity and Inclusion at Danone. And Danone is actually a company that has been doing a lot for the gender equality and gender pay gap closure, compared to with large programs, particularly around parental leave. So we're very happy to hear from you, Putri, what you've been doing and how it's been working, and what other companies might be able to learn from you.
Thank you, Monica. Good morning, afternoon, everyone around the world. So in Danone, we are a food manufacturing company. So we are FMCG company, and we are operating in more than 55 countries around the world, and we have around more than 100,000 employees. So we have early in our years of implementing overall diversity and inclusion topics, we made a conscious decision to focus first on gender topics because of several reasons. First, because of course our consumers, the purchasing power, people go to buy our products in the supermarkets. 70% are women who make the decisions of purchasing our things, our products, and also because of course the more diverse teams it's been proven by a lot of researchers that the more diverse teams are, the more performance we get in terms of profitability and also more innovations. So there's clearly business reasons to do that. And the first thing we did was really to map the data, where we were back then. So in terms of percentage of women in every levels of the organizations, and also finding the reasons why that is such the case. For example, we have 17% when we started this program in 2016, 17% women in executive populations. We have less than 45% women in the managers' position. So that's like the pipeline for the executive population and also the directors' population. So we consciously make a target, also a gender balance targets in each of these populations. And so far we have been increasing women gender balance in the executive population from 17 to 30%. No, now we are 33%. So we have made a lot of progress in the past years. And parental policy is one of the key things that we did. Of course, it's not the only solutions. We also do a lot of career developments, women leadership programs, so and also unconscious bias, improving the system on how we assess talent. So this is also something that is being done in parallel with the parental policies. So, but on the parental policy part, at that time we decided to launch globally, and this is a global policy, and it took us 3 years to implement this policy globally. And it was a policy of 18 weeks primary caregivers leave. So basically, primary caregivers are gender neutral, and it can be taken by both men and women in this case, including also the same-sex parents as well. So it has been quite challenging to implement this policy globally, because there's a lot of countries with a culture of, for example, we do not accept the countries to, when they build the local policy, we do not accept the wordings maternity or paternity leave. We want them to call it parental leave, because parents are the more inclusive words to use in our policy. So basically, of course, we have more challenges in countries like in Asia, in the Middle East, in Africa countries, including China as well. But I think it's also like progressing the mindset of our local teams on the ground. That's also like quite a journey to build together with our global rewards team. So we are working together, making sure that we also coach the local teams on why we need to do this change and what's in it for them. And our policy is also not only covering the leave part, but also making sure that we have support for parents prenatal, during, and postnatal. So prenatal means like, because we are also a nutrition company, we also produce nutrition for infants, but also for toddlers. And we want to also walk the talk in terms of helping our employees to go through their parental journey. So therefore, we also provide like nutritional consultations, prenatal, during is also, of course, all the supports provided in terms of the maternity care, prenatal and during and after. And the postnatal, of course, this is also equipped with the flexibility policy that we provide for both parents, men and women, if they want to take more flexible working options. And we let each local teams to define what would be the best options for that could work for each local team. It could be job sharing, it could be flexible working, like 1 or 2 days working from home every week, for example. So there are like part-time working as well. And postnatal includes also lactation, like the lactation rooms in our sites, in all sites where we have more than 50 women on the site. So that's also included in the policy. And of course, that's also accompanied by counseling sessions. Like, for example, we have coaching sessions for managers who have their teams going to leave for parental leave, and also coaching for the parents when they come back, when they return from the parental leave. And we also have some countries like Indonesia. We provide lactation advisors, for example, for the women to make sure that they do it correctly, because it's super important for women in Indonesia. Well, not only Indonesia in general, but in Indonesia, it's a very important in the community that women give breast milk, and it's like a social pressure also for them if they cannot do that. So we provide lactation advisors as well in certain countries in this world. And in some countries, we even go further, where we look at opportunities to look at the proof that actually, because a lot of managers think that when people go on into maternity or into parental leave, they will come back becoming not focused or being less in terms of their leadership skills. But we are tracking this because we ask them to take like a leadership test before and after they take the parental leave. And we have been proving that actually leadership skills like time management, like communication skills, so there are key skills that have been improved when parents take parental leave. So this is also something that we also track really like the numbers of how many people are taking this parental leave, women and men every year, and how many of the women come back from the parental leave. And this measurement is important, because then you will be able to see the trends and how then we can put some more interventions in certain areas, for example. So this is basically the things that asking men to take leave is also challenging, especially in those countries. But we've been doing a lot of campaign in this topic, and we have highlighted role models in our companies. For example, we have a couple in Ukraine and one in the Middle East. They both work in Danone, men and women work in Danone. And the couple decide that the men take the primary caregivers, and the women come back to work earlier, and that proves that it's working, because the man sees more opportunities for the woman, because they are close to promotions, and basically they feel that it's good for the woman to come back earlier than them. So it's kind of like highlighting these role models around the world, especially in those sensitive or specific countries that are kind of like we still need more time to change the mindset of the people there. So this is some examples that I can share with you in terms of parental leave. But of course, it's not the only intervention that we do. Like of course, the career development part is also super important, making sure that we have career pipeline. In the way we build the talent pipeline, we always make sure that there are women in the shortlist candidates. All these things, and especially we also focus on functions that are more challenging for women, like operations, like IT, for example, where we can really make a difference when we see the improvement in terms of gender balance in that area. But also in the opposite of functions like HR, where there are more women in these functions, we also would like to have more men. So so we want to try to make sure that we engage both men and women. And also this is also why we joined the He for She movement with the UN Women. So He for She means also we try to engage also the men to become mentors, to become sponsors for the women talents, and make sure that also the unconscious biases that are existing in our performance reviews process, in our talent review process, that also we are tackling that as well. So we're both fixing the system, but also making sure that the policies are there to help the people to improve.
Great, thank you so much, Putri. Thank you for also giving us such a global view and talking about some countries that are not OECD member countries yet. but where you're also encountering specific challenges. And it's very interesting to hear that, because in a sense, being such a multinational company, you're like a microcosm of all these different cultural issues that you're tackling in each of the countries where you're active, and trying to put these global policies in place. Very interesting. Thanks so much. We're a little bit short on time, so I would like to quickly now move to the OECD presentations, and if we have more time afterwards, then we can always take a few more questions. Willem, without further ado, over to you to give us a little bit of an overview of what the evidence says that we collect at the OECD. Willem Adema is Senior Economist in the Social Policy Division, and as I always tend to say, our man for gender.
Thank you, Monica. Yes, I will be as short as I can, but I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Icelandic authorities for reminding us and taking the initiative over summer to start to think about this event. Would also like to thank the US authorities. They have made a financial contribution to our work on extending gender indicators, and some of the work you will see in a minute is related to that. So thanks to them for that support, and also to my colleagues in the Social Policy Division who've been working on this. Now, I'm going to try and start and share my screen, but that is now disabled. Host disabled participant screen sharing. So if that can be fixed one way or the other. There we go. I think. Yeah, we're making progress. And the only thing I have to do now is that, and we're in business. Right, it's very tricky to compare parental leave systems across the OECD, because each system has its own rules and regulations, and some systems are very simple when leave for mothers and fathers and partners is integrated in one simple system. In other countries, that's not the case. The other thing is parental leave systems have options, so you can sometimes take shorter leaves at higher payment rates. So while we make comparisons, we have to make assumptions about what people do, just to give you an indication of how the system may work. If you want to know more, in the parental leave indicators in the OECD family database, you can find detail. But basically, this chart shows the leave that is available for mothers to take, because overall it is still the mothers who take the parental leave, and the period which is earmarked for fathers either via paternity leave, a daddy quota, or a bonus month. And you can see on the left-hand side, countries like Finland, the Slovak Republic, and Hungary, leave can be taken for almost up to 3 years. This is either a home care leave or a parental leave, which isn't necessarily well paid throughout the period. So a lot of people actually go back from leave in Hungary after 2 years when the payment rate plummets. You can see that in Korea, fathers and mothers have an individual entitlement to leave, but they can't take it at the same time, whereas in Japan, as you can see with the shaded bar, it can. If you think about gender equality, similar entitlements for men and women, then the Icelandic system does well, but also Portugal, because Portugal is a slightly more complicated system than the Icelandic one, and you have 20 days of mandatory leave, and then you have 30 days which you need to qualify for the 30 bonus days. But if you add it all up, it's becoming fairly comparable. You also see on the right-hand side countries who have shorter leave periods, and the US is the one OECD country without a paid leave period across the country. Now, when it comes to using leave and just looking at the numbers and how leave takers are divided within a given year compared to 100 live births, you will see that in most countries, women on the whole, on the right-hand side, are the main leave takers. But in the Nordic countries, Portugal, and also Luxembourg, the gender share in leave takers is much more equal. That doesn't mean that men and women take leave for the same amount of time, but that within a year, there are similar amount of fathers who take leave compared to mothers. And that is increasing. Here you can see the share of users who are fathers, and the white diamond gives you the share in 2010, and the blue bar gives you the 2021 number. And you can see that in Sweden and in Denmark and in Portugal, the share has been high for about a decade now. But in other countries, in Korea and Japan, this has increased markedly. Estonia has also gone up, but it's a country where you can take the parental leave payment while working. So it makes the comparison with other countries even more important. What I would like to point out, of course, on the right-hand side, you see the US. This is not totally comparable with the other numbers, which are basically based on administrative data on the use of parental leave schemes. But for the US, we have used the Survey of Income Program Participation to calculate some numbers on the use of leave as parents have responded to the survey. And you can see that about 38% here of the people who take paid leave are fathers. Now, I told you that the US is the only country without paid family leave system across the nation, but there are some states who have paid family leave. California has one, and there's 40 million people there, so that's quite a huge number. And the same applies to New Jersey, where there's about 9 million people. In addition, of course, firms, often larger firms, make paid leave payments available to the workers. So the number can be considerable. Now, finally, I said that the number of fathers who are taking leave is increasing across country, but when it comes to the vision of parental leave days and how they are divided among men and women, it is still predominantly the women who take the bulk of parental leave days. And this also applies to Norway, Sweden, Iceland, Portugal, and the many other countries in the OECD where fathers' leave arrangements are not that well developed. So in sum, yes, we have made progress. Yes, changes in parental leave legislation which focus on fathers and give them either a strong incentive or an obligation to take leave do help. They do take it, but very often, also in Nordic countries, they only take what they are supposed to be taken. And when it comes to sharing of leave days, it is still often the mother who takes the lead. So there's still a fair bit of work to do. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Willem. Now, before I hand over to our OECD gender champion, Ulrich Knudsen, our Deputy Secretary General, there's just one question in the chat which goes specifically to Japan, and I would like to give Ms. Hasegawa the opportunity to answer that. I will just quickly read it. In Japan, the root cause of gender pay gap seems to stem from the pre-hiring stage. How do you see the existence of non-career track Ippan Shoku and career track Soko Shoku positions in relation to the strong gender stigma that surrounds these roles? So basically more women apply or get hired for the non-career track positions, which offer less salary. And what might Keidanran be able to do to help address this issue? Ms. Hasegawa, can you just provide a short answer to that question?
I think that the different career track, that Ippanshoku and Sogoshoku, is kind of decreasing, actually. So that the many major Japanese corporations are taking a single career track, or like pay the wages so that the same job, the same pay principle actually applies. But I think that the wage gap between men and women, which exists actually, is because of the number of years that female and male employees continue to work in the same workplace. I mean, the same company differ. That the female still have a smaller, I mean, the less number of years of work in the same corporations. So that in Japanese corporations, that still wage increase in accordance with the number of years continued work. So I think that explains the majority of the wage gap between men and female in Japan.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I think we've come to the end of our seminar. Unfortunately, I think we all have many questions after what the many interventions we've heard, the data that Willem has shown us. But unfortunately, we have to close soon now, and that's why I would like to hand over to Ulrich Knudsen, the Deputy Secretary General of the OECD and Gender Champion, for his concluding remarks.
Thank you very much, Monica. Good morning, ministers, ambassadors, guests, colleagues. It really has been a very rich discussion, but let me start by thanking Iceland for gathering us today again this year to celebrate the International Equal Pay Day. I don't know if two makes a tradition, Unor, but we'll see. It's certainly been two exciting events, both last year and this year. A special thanks, of course, to you, Unor, for organizing this, but also Manuel, Minister Gudbrandsson, Minister Chinetti, Ms. Hasegawa, and Ms. Realita for the insights that you've shared here today. I think perhaps particularly on parental leave, it's been very encouraging and inspiring, hopefully also for the audience to hear about the action taken. I think there's just no way around it. We need to encourage more fathers to take paternity leave. It's probably the most effective tool out there to reduce the gender pay gap. And I think it's fair to say that Iceland arguably has the most gender equal parental leave system of all countries in the OECD, with each parent equally granted 6 months of paid leave. This has brought, as we've heard, about a very, very significant change indeed in Ireland. The share of paid leave days taken by fathers is now more than 10 times the share seen in 2001. And the minister also made reference to 2001 when he was slightly younger. I feel I was much younger in 2001, so congratulations on only being slightly younger then. We also heard today that other countries are making very good progress. We heard about the percentage of eligible fathers taking paternity leave in Japan, now increased from 2% in 10 to 14% in 21. That's also quite significant. The share of men among parental leave takers today in 14 countries have now passed 20%, and it's actually more than 40% in Nordic countries. It's not only about policies and governments and the public sector. I think what Ms. Hasegawa and Ms. Realita highlighted today really was a reminder of the importance of engaging with the private sector in these efforts. Matthias this morning in his opening remarks also mentioned this as one out of three very, very important issues to pursue. He stressed that. I totally agree. Companies have a very central role in implementing equal pay for equal work and making the necessary cultural and organizational change within their corporations. Otherwise, we won't achieve gender equality. So I hope, truly hope that the examples and best practices that we've heard about here today will inspire further, will inspire stronger action on parental leave and for better access to childcare, as also highlighted by Minister Chinetti. So let me just close with a few remarks about the future and what we intend to do here at the OECD. There's no doubt that further progress, in order to achieve that, we need global commitment, we need coordinated action. Matthias alluded to it in his opening remarks, and I think, Monica, you promised that I would come back to this issue. There was a little bit of a piece of news hidden there in Matthias's speech, namely that we are planning to do a gender strategy. You know, since Matthias took office last year, he has presented in council strategies on digital, strategies on climate, strategies on trade. And we thought it would be a good idea for the next batch of strategies also to look at a gender strategy. I have to say this is very embryonic. We've only just now started looking at it. But I think it's a great way to involve the whole of the Secretariat, but also ambassadors in council to put a gender strategy draft paper before them in a matter of some months. So we can all look forward to that discussion. Let me also mention, finally, the Equal Pay International Coalition, EPIC, that the OECD co-founded with the International Labour Organization and UN Women back in 2017. It's also an important agent of change for pay equality in our society. It already now counts more than 50 members from the public and the private sector. So we also look forward to expanding this membership. And then maybe just as the very final point, I want to pick up what the Icelandic minister said in the beginning, but was also touched upon by you, Monica, in anecdotes by Japan and others, that we can do so much with the private sector and we can have policy initiatives and so on, but really the change in attitude is perhaps the most important driver of this. So I think if this event today has helped change the attitudes of listeners, or you know, this is spreading like circles in the water, I think that is tremendously important as well. So still a long way to go. As OECD Gender and Diversity Champion, I really look forward to strengthening our action for gender equality in the widest possible sense, well, diversity in its widest possible sense. So I call on all of us, really, governments, IOs, the private sector, the public, to play our part in making gender equality more of a reality in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ulrik. And with that, I close the meeting today, again, with great thanks to Iceland. And I'm sure we have a rendezvous for next year with Iceland again for the International Equal Pay Day. And I wish you all a good remainder of the day or evening to Japan. And to all our listeners, celebrate equal pay, and let's all do our share of what we can to close that gap. Thank you.